this text always makes me think of the first time that I was at a church when a bishop came to visit. For those of you who are familiar with the Episcopal Church in this area for a few decades, it was Bishop Spong, so that was 3 bishops ago at this point. And there was a very precocious little girl named Carly. And there had been this big build-up about the bishop coming for a visit, and she'd heard about it week after week. And she showed up to church that day in a tiara. So that was nice because the bishop had his mitre, but she was wearing her tiara, so that kind of showed that they, had this special relationship. And then when it came for communion, I was a chalice bearer, and the bishop was communing people, and my priest was communing people, and I was the acolyte, so I had the chalice, so I was listening as I went along, and I was hearing the bishop say, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven. He's walking along, and my priest is saying the same thing, and Carly comes up, and she's standing there with her mother, and when the bishop gets nearby to hand out the bread, Carly sticks her elbow in her mother's stomach and stands in front in her tiara so she can be first. And so the bishop, Bishop Spong, Carly, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, and he keeps moving along, and my priest leans down next to me and whispers to Carly and says, all right, Carly, just remember, first the communion, last in the kingdom of heaven. I think this girl is probably about 30 now and most likely in therapy. But I've never forgotten. And it sounds to me like what's going on with James and John this morning is just like what was going on with Carly. And if you haven't had children, or if you haven't been close to a child, you might not know this, but James and John say verbatim exactly something that children say to you once they reach about 12. It's the exact same sentence. And it goes like this. I have something to ask you for, but before I ask it, I want you to promise me you're going to say yes. How many parents have heard that? Promise me you're going to say yes before I tell you what it is. I hear it all the time. They say that to Jesus. Unbelievable. These are grown men. And so Jesus, like a good parent, says, okay, spit it out. What do you want? And the answer is, when you come into your glory, promise us that you're going to let us be at your right hand and at your left. What James and John don't understand, even though Jesus has shared this information with them, and I've also had this happen to me with children, when you tell them what's going to happen next, there's this preteen, I don't know whether it's a teenager thing, but I have the 12, 13-year-old, maybe that's young teenager, they have this kind of dementia. And you can tell them, we are going to go to the doctor's, and then we're going to go out to lunch, and then you can go visit your friend. And they won't have heard it. They look at you blankly when you say, get on your shoes. They have no idea what you're talking about. You have to be prepared to say it at least 3 times. And Linda is shaking her head because she knows this is true. Jesus just told them, we are on our way to Jerusalem. The news is not what you wanted to hear about your glory, because Jesus is going to his crucifixion. And he says that on the 3rd day he's going to rise, but it's kind of like when your parent driving the car. They didn't hear anything he just said. Because they say, when you come into your glory, can I be at your right hand and can he be at your left? They heard nothing. They don't know what they're asking for. This is another thing with children. Jesus tells them, you don't understand what you're asking for. Because if you did, you wouldn't want to be at my right hand and at my left. Later on, we're going to find out who actually winds up at Jesus' right hand and at his left. It's 2 criminals on a cross in Calvary. But this is for later. And all all that we know is that James and John definitely, no matter what happens next, want to be first. I love going to lots of places to eat, but if it comes to knishes, which is one of my favorite things, every once in a while, maybe once a year, I make it across the river explicitly to go to Jonas Schimmel's. And Jonas Schimmel's is a first-floor railroad apartment that for like 130 years, all they've been doing is churning out knishes. And they even have a dumbwaiter that still works. And if you sit next to the dumbwaiter, you can see the knishes come down on the dumbwaiter. And if you don't know what a knish is, it's like a pastry, usually filled with potato, but they've been yuppified, and now they have all kinds of kale knish, I don't know. But it's delicious. And you can get an egg cream in a knish. And for me, it's like heaven. And it's a pretty famous place, even though it's a hole in the wall, and all along the walls there are pictures of famous people eating knishes at Jonas Schimmel's. And so you sit there and you're like, damn, I knew I was smart. Robert De Niro comes here to eat knish. I must be in the right place, right? Look, the Marx Brothers, they love knishes at Jonas Schimmel's. And so you feel really good about yourself, because there you are, sitting in the same place where Chico Marx ate a knish. Maybe in the same seat. It makes me very happy. It makes the knish even taste better. It's the atmosphere. It's the dingy atmosphere. So there is this feeling of wanting, when James and John are asking to be at Jesus' right hand and at his left, there's something about being associated with him that makes everything seem better and taste better, right? That makes life seem more exciting. They know he's got something magic about him, and they want it to kind of flake off onto them. I saw this happening in person last month when we consecrated the 11th bishop of Newark. And the presider at the consecration was the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church in the United States, Michael Curry. Now, here's the thing about the Episcopal Church in the United States. It is a very small group of people. We used to be the church of presidents and the power brokers of the world, and it used to be that when you wanted to conduct business in Jersey City or Hoboken, and, you were a developer or a banker or somebody important, you showed up for worship here. That hasn't been true for probably 80 or 90 years. Some Episcopalians haven't gotten that message, and they think that the Episcopal Church is still the end-all and be-all. So there's those people that go to the consecration, and then there are the people who are at the consecration who you might even not recognize the name Michael Curry because it was so 3 months ago. Michael Curry became very famous for 5 minutes because he was the officiant at the royal wedding in England. And for 5 minutes, all of us who used to be excited to be Episcopalians because we were really important, Michael Curry was in England and he made it in the news and he preached at the royal wedding and he was famous for 5 minutes and it was super exciting. Which is why when we went to NJPAC, I've done it 2 times, gone to NJPAC to go consecrate a bishop, Michael Curry could barely put his vestments on because everybody was coming up to him with a camera, with their phone, taking a selfie with Michael, like, put your hand around Michael Curry and go like this, right? Click, click. And this is one of the things I've learned about myself. You might find this to be true about you, too. I cannot stand people who are like me. They make me sick. I have one clergy friend. And I watched priest after priest take a picture of themselves with Michael freaking Curry, kind of like, yeah, Michael Curry and I, we go to Jonas Schimmel's and eat knishes because, that's just where we hang. That's just how we roll. Me and Michael Curry. And they put it up on Facebook. Like every single priest in the Diocese of Newark, it's like, me and Michael Curry. It makes me ill. I can't stand it. But here's the thing. Okay, so self-loathing is in there somewhere. I should take that to a shrink. But let's forget all of that for a second. Here's the issue. And this is true for poor James and John like it is for the clergy, and ultimately like it is for me, because I was standing next to Michael Curry basically saying, I'm too good to come and take a picture with you, but I'm totally in love with you, Michael Curry. Right? That's what I did. It's like, good job, Lori, you're morally superior, whatever. So, anyway, the thing that makes me feel proud when I see Michael Curry or when James and John are looking at Jesus, it's something that's actually good about us. So, yes, they want to be glorified with Jesus, but the reason that they want that is because they love him. And the reason that the clergy want to have selfies with Michael Curry is because they're saying, who you are, I want in on that. And when people see me, when I go out into the world, this is why I have it posted on Facebook, when people look at me, I want them to remember you. Jesus, when people see me, I want them to think of you. Glorify me in that way. Give me that. And what Jesus says to them, after he rolls his eyes, it's like, there's nothing that I want more than that. There is nothing in the world Jesus wants more. That for when we go out into the world, for people to see him, when they look at us. And how does that happen? Jesus says it happens when you serve. Every time you do something out of love for Christ, whether it's picking up trash along the street, or bagging food at the Triangle Park Center, or showing up early to set up a slideshow, or standing at the door to greet the next person walking in, anything you do like that, Jesus promises when they see you doing that, they're going to see me. Even if they don't recognize me right away, they will. They will. I'll have been here 6 years in February. And when I think about how many times you have done something out of love in front of me or for me or with me, it brings me to tears. How many times you've cleaned up my mess in the sacristy or forgiven me something or given me another chance or showed me God's love by the way you sing or by the way you knit or by the way you make your 3-bean casserole or by the way you open your arms and hug me with such joy like you haven't seen me in 10 years and you just saw me Tuesday. Every time you do that, I see Christ. I love thinking about church just generally, buildings in particular. And one of the things that delights me most about them is that they have absolutely no utility in themselves. You know? If you want a good condition, go to Yona Schimmel's. If you got to do your laundry, you go to the laundromat. If you want a book, you go to the library. What is church for? And it's always the most beautiful building in the neighborhood, right? What's it for? It's a place to practice loving Jesus. That's all it is. It's a place to transform the entire world. If this church has been a place where you've come to recognize Jesus, either by his invitation to service or in somebody's generosity and extravagant love for you, I'd invite you to take the carnation next to you and say a little prayer of thanksgiving. And if you feel moved to do so, stick it in one of the vases by the altar. And we'll have a couple of minutes of silent reflection.